Hi everyone, hope everybody had a good day. So today I'm going to be talking about something that is very actually close to my heart. It's one of the worst that I can think of, the worst miscarriages of justice. It was a travesty, it was a disgrace, I would say, in the whole of the British justice system. That's what I believe. There have been many, don't get me wrong, but this one really makes my blood boil for many reasons. But as I had told you all before, my mother is from Ireland, and she didn't raise us. My dad, she came from Ireland with her sister, and to Liverpool actually, and you know, they think the streets of London and England in general are paved with gold, and quickly found out they were not. Anyway, so she didn't raise us. That when her and my dad split up, he took us to London and she stayed in Liverpool. Anyway, as I got older, she reached out, and I went down to Liverpool and stayed with her for a few months. And it was during this time, you know, that I asked her about the Irish side of the family, because we didn't really know them. My auntie Katie, I knew, and my cousins, you know, that were born in Liverpool there. But she had brothers and sisters still in Ireland, and she had told me, you know, at that time that two of her brothers were actually in Long Kesh, known as the Maze, Her Majesty's Prison, the Maze, and it was then that I knew the deal. Anyway, when I got back to London, going back to London was kind of surreal, because during that time, I was real young, but I can remember London actually was under attack by the Provisional IRA, and they were bombing everywhere. There were bombs going off everywhere. The subway, you know, the tube going into London. They would choose places where a lot of people, like Harrods, you know, a big department store. They would choose kind of places like that. And I can remember it was surreal, because you would get on the tube and there would be all these notices, you know, if you see a strange package, very similar to how it is now, you know, with the other terrorists, but you know, report any suspicious packages, stuff like that. And it was kind of weird, you know, going into London every day not knowing if you were going to come home. And it was literally like that, because you never knew where the next bomb was going to go off. And so and I can remember being not in fear exactly, that wouldn't be the right word, but kind of, you know, it would cross my mind, put it that way, every time I got on the tube or went somewhere, because you never knew, you know, what was going to happen, you know, that day. Anyway, so this is about a bombing that happened in Guilford. It was called the Guildford Pub Bombing, and basically in October 5th, 1974, people were going out for the night, and the IRA had planted a bomb in the pub, killing and maiming many. It was absolutely terrible. And I'll show you a quick picture. Okay, that was the aftermath, you know, of the pub. And essentially, people were like outraged, you know, really outraged. I mean, it was just awful, absolutely awful. I can't even tell you how bad it was. Anyway, so the story of the Guildford Four, it's Jerry Conlon, Paul Hill, Carol Richardson, and Paddy Armstrong were Patrick Armstrong actually, but they called him Paddy. They were arrested in connection with the bombings, but basically what had happened, it starts with Jerry Conlon. He was in Belfast. He was really like a petty thief. He had no connection with the IRA whatsoever. I mean, he grew up around it. It was all around him, but they wouldn't take him into the IRA because let me give you a picture of them. Okay, that's Jerry Conlon on the left. Then you've got Paul Hill, Paddy Armstrong, and Carol Richardson. Now, basically, they wouldn't take Jerry. Sorry, it went out of my head for a second. They wouldn't take Jerry into the IRA. They had they would take them young and train them. It was a military organisation, but they wouldn't take Jerry because he was a petty thief, and he wouldn't do as he was told to do. And he kept thieving. He'd go on top of houses and steal lead off the roof, stuff like that. And one particular time he went up there and he had like a stick and he was messing around with it, and the British soldiers thought it was a sniper, that he had a gun, and they chased him all through the houses. They were like alleys and entryways and escape routes for the IRA. If stuff did happen, they could go in through this maze of houses, and people would open and shut the door and let him in and go through the that's how it went. And they were chasing him. Anyway, the IRA were pissed because they didn't want him doing that, because they were bringing attention to their safe houses where they stored their weapons, whatever. And so they were going to kneecap him. And they did that a lot back then to people that, didn't do as they were told, or, for whatever infraction. And they were going to shoot him in the knees. And they got him, actually, him and his friend. And they were about to do it. But his father, Giuseppe Conlon. Now, Giuseppe Conlon was a sweetheart of a man, and he wasn't Italian. No, the mother named him Giuseppe because there used to be an Italian ice cream parlour on the corner, and the guy that owned that parlour was called Giuseppe, and she loved the name, so the father was named Giuseppe. Anyway, essentially what happened, he begged them. He knew all the IRA higher ups, and he begged them not to do it, and that he would send him to England, which he did. And so he packs Jerry off to England, and on the ferry, that's where he meets Paul Hill. Well, Jerry was actually supposed to go and stay with his aunt, Annie Maguire. She was already in England, and that's where he was supposed to go. But it was the 70s. They were hippies. They were on drugs, free love, free sex, whatever. And they did go and see the aunt, but they went to a squat, which is where a bunch of hippies took over a house, and that's where Paddy Armstrong was staying, and he had him stay. And so basically, in a nutshell, what happened is there was a guy there that really didn't like the Irish. I don't think he definitely didn't like Jerry Conlon, and so when the bombing happened, there was an outcry. They wanted to catch these people. They wanted to catch them quick, and they wanted them dealt with quickly. So this guy, out of jealousy, because Jerry used to get all the girls, he was a good-looking guy, here's a picture of Jerry. Oh, that was on his release, actually. That's Carol Richardson. That's when she was arrested. She was at 17. She was a young girl. This is Giuseppe Conlon, and let's see, Paul Hill back then. and this was Paddy Armstrong then and now. Actually, he doesn't look much different, does he, him? Anyway, so once the bombing happened, this guy goes to the police and rats on him and says that he believes they did it. Now, they were on the other side of London. They had nothing to do with it. Prior to this happening, on the night of the bombing, Jerry and Paul were on the other side of London. And what had happened is they had robbed this hooker's house, prostitute's house. She was a high-end prostitute and she had a beautiful, apartment and stuff. And they broke in there and they got £700, which was a lot of money back then. So Jerry decided, they went to the park and they run into this old Irish guy. He was a homeless guy. And he asked him, why are you here in London? The streets, are not paved with gold. And Jerry said at that moment, he thought, yeah, why am I here, and he decided to go back to Belfast, but Paul and them stayed in London. Anyway, he goes back to Belfast and he's got all this money and he's buying all this stuff, and then next thing you know, here come the British soldiers, special branch. They come and put a hood over his head, drag him out of bed, drag him on a plane and put him right back to London. Well, by then they'd already had the other three in custody because this guy had said it was these four people. Carol Richardson was actually English. She wasn't even Irish, so, and she was a kid. They were all kids, And basically they tortured, they beat them. And what had happened is, back then, when you were taken into custody, the police were only allowed to keep you for 48 hours. But they changed it for this. And they said they could keep them for a week. In fact, now I believe they can keep you indefinitely. You don't have to be released. You're released at their pleasure, if you will. And Jerry Conlon actually said, had it been where they kept him for 48 hours, he probably could have withstood it. They put a gun in his mouth. They threatened his family. They beat them. They tortured him. Had him up all night. I mean, it was just terrible. And in the end, they admitted to it. It was the worst case of coercion I've ever seen or heard ever. I mean, it was just an absolute disgrace what they did. It just makes my blood boil. But anyway, that brings me to the Maguire Seven. Now, the Maguire Seven, there's the Guildford 4 and there's the Maguire Seven. Now, the Maguire Seven were Jerry Conlon's family. Annie Maguire, her husband. I think there was a 14-year-old boy. They were arrested also. Now, they lived in London. I think I have a picture of the family. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is part of the Maguire family. And they were arrested and charged with making bomb making. And when he gets over to England, they arrest him. Now, he was sickly anyway, you know, he had emphysema and other issues going on. But anyway, they were all taken to court very, very quickly. It was very fast. It was terrible what they did. In any event, they had a trial, which it wasn't really a very long trial. And this is Justice John Donaldson. He sentenced them to like ridiculous sentences. Annie Maguire got 14 years. Patrick Maguire got 14 years. The younger Patrick Maguire, he was 14. He got 4 years. Vincent Maguire got 17 years. Sean Smith got 12 years. Patrick O'Neill got 12 years. And Giuseppe Conlon, Jerry Conlon's father, got 12 years. Now, the bad thing about this was that this guy, this judge, Judge Donaldson, Chief Justice Donaldson, said when it came to sentencing, because back then the way they did it, we didn't have the death penalty anymore. We used to have hanging, but we did. There was an exception to that. If they had been charged with treason, which is crimes against the crown, which this would have been looked at as crimes against the crown. However, they weren't charged with treason. Had they have been charged with treason, and that judge said during sentencing that he wished they'd have been charged with treason, because he would have recommended that they be hung. And considering what happened later, it's just, oh my God, it just makes you sick to your stomach. Anyway, so yeah, that's what he said. So what he did was he recommended 30 years for Jerry Conlon, and for Paddy Armstrong he recommended that he be in there till he's a great age. I think Paul Hill got something similar. He got like a whole life sentence, I do believe. And off they went to prison, all of them. Now what had happened is during this time, people were questioning, how can this be? Because luckily Jerry Giuseppe got really sick in prison. They were treated horribly. Giuseppe got real ill, and in between this time, Giuseppe didn't stop fighting to get to clear their names. He didn't stop. They'd gone to all different lawyers and whatever, and then a particular lawyer, her name is Gareth Pierce. This is Gareth. She took on the case, and she was meticulous. She went through everything and found that they had basically been set up and railroaded. In fact, 3 British police officers, Thomas Style, John Donaldson. Now, I don't know if this John Donaldson was related to Lord Justice Donaldson, possibly. I don't know, it might have been a coincidence. And the other policeman was Vernon Atwell. I mean, basically what they did was they hid evidence from the defence. There were notes written. For example, Jerry Conlon had said that he was on the other side of London. You know, they'd robbed this prostitute's house and they'd been sitting on a bench with this homeless guy. And what had happened, the homeless guy had carved his name into the bench because, and he had said to them at the time, you know, you might want to go back to Ireland because you're going to end up like me. This is my bench, you know. And they had told the officers that. The officers found this guy. They found him and didn't bring it forward. In fact, they knew after a month of these convictions that they'd got the wrong people. And rather than you know, come clean and say, okay, we made a mistake to save face, they let them serve years in prison. I want to say Jerry Conlon did 15 years, Paul Hill. Giuseppe Conlon died in prison, an innocent man. And they didn't even pardon him until like recently. You know, what good that is to him now, I don't know, but it just infuriates me. And what happened is Gareth here, you know, went through the files, and it took a long ass time, let me tell you, but she wouldn't stop. She was like a warrior for them. And she came across many notes, handwritten notes, not to be shown to the defence. And it was the you know, homeless guy that they found, and she even found the bench with the initials carved in, and there was a note attached to it not to be shown to the defence. They hid a lot of evidence. It was absolutely disgusting what they did. Anyway, finally there was you know, they got it to be heard again, you know, a retrial. And Gareth, well, Paul Hill had a different attorney, and Paul Hill got, you know, they obviously shared the same information, but Paul Hill had been accused of killing a British soldier. I think his name was Brian Shaw. And what they did is, when they were interrogating them, you know, Paul Hill, about the Guildford bombing, they threw in the death of this British soldier. Well, by then he'd been tortured and beaten so much, he admitted to that too, but that was squashed also. Anyway, Gareth got them out, essentially, you know. And these are some of the victims of the bombing, you know, may they rest in peace. Now, you know, I'm not going to, this is not a political thing, you know, I'm not going into the politics of it. You know, these people were all innocent. They were out for a night out. You know, who knew what would happen, you know. But yeah, these are the victims of that Guildford pub bombing, and you know, may they rest in peace. Anyway, this is the funeral of Giuseppe Conlon, which was just a travesty. It makes me feel sick even seeing this. That was at his funeral. So where are they now, we might ask. So this is Paddy Armstrong. Now, basically what happened, their lives were ruined. Their lives were really ruined. You know, Paddy here, he just had a rough time of it. You know, he drinks and drugs, and he finally met his wife and settled down. He currently lives in Dublin, had children, and has kind of put it behind him, you know. So he kind of did okay, but it just wasn't good. Jerry Conlon, he blew like almost £1 million on drink and drugs and cocaine. You know, he would buy up to £10,000 worth at a time. And you know, the sad part with Jerry was he blamed himself for his father's death, for Giuseppe's death. You know, if he hadn't have done this, he hadn't have done that, and it haunted him his entire life, and drink and drugs and whatever. And he died, when did he die? 2014. You know, and during that time as well, while he was doing all this coke stuff, he was hanging around with Johnny Depp. They'd go all around Ireland and whatever, but it was really, really sad. He never got over Giuseppe's death, and I don't blame him. Like, there is a movie, Daniel Day-Lewis is in the movie. It's called In the Name of the Father, and I believe it's on YouTube. So if you're interested in it, it's a really, really good movie. I cried for like hours after watching that movie. That's how sad it was. It was sad, it was awful. But it's the truth. It's what happened, you know. The British were bastards, absolute bastards. I mean, how they could do that to these people, I just don't know. Anyway, now this one you might recognise. This is Paul Hill. Now, Paul Hill married Robert F. Kennedy's daughter Courtney, and they had a daughter, Sasha, and unfortunately she died recently of a drugs overdose. And he's a human rights campaigner, and he lives in the United States. And this is Saoirse is her name, actually. This is Saoirse. Isn't she gorgeous? And she recently died of a drug overdose. And this was Jerry Conlon on the day of his release. I mean, oh my God, I can't imagine. And what happened was, when they, you know, the judge acquitted them all and said, you can go. You know, the police tried to say, well, no, go out the back, you know, because there's too much press, there's too much stuff out the front. And Jerry Conlon said no. You know, he had promised his father, when he was dying, they let him see Giuseppe. And Giuseppe said, don't worry about me. He said that when you're going to get acquitted, he said, and when you do, he said they brought you in the front door and you were to go out the front door. And that's exactly what he did. He pushed past everybody and went out the front door, and there was this big like uproar. You know, it was just so sad. I mean, oh my God, I cried when I even saw that in the movie, because I thought of poor old Giuseppe. And then Carol Richardson, she was English actually. I don't know why they did that to her. She married and had a daughter, but she passed away in 2012. She moved to Belfast actually, and she was 55 when she died. I think Jerry Conlon was like 61. You know, they weren't really that old, you know, but it was a travesty the way they did them. To think that they knew a month after these people were sentenced that they were innocent, and they did nothing about it. They let them sit and rot. They let Giuseppe Conlon die in there, you know. And that's not the only miscarriage of justice. There were several others. There was the Birmingham Six, the hunger strikers. That makes my blood boil as well, because, you know, they were asking really for very little. But, you know, it is what it is. I may do one on Bobby Sands now that I'm all fired up. And this particular story really, really does hit home for me. You know, it really was outrageous. But anyway, so I wanted to share with you, this is Jerry Conlon. He became like a human rights activist as well, and you know, he helped get people released. I want to share with you this. This was his speech. Let me see if it'll work. Yeah, hold on. This was his speech. This kind of sent chills, gave me the chills, it really did. But you can hear in his own words, you know, what they did. So, hold on. All right. Let me remove my...
Kidnapped from my bed by soldiers with grease paint on their faces, dragged from my bed, handcuffed and taken to the police station and tortured. I was then hooded and handcuffed and flown to a foreign country, England, and tortured again. And in the period of 7 days, the British government, and I don't say the British police, I say the British government, Roy Jenkins in particular, Merlin Rees as well, one of those two signed a form that gave immunity to the police who were allowed to torture us. And I mean torture. To be held naked, to have Alsatian dogs set upon you, to be taken out naked to country lanes, hooded, handcuffed, the hood taken off and told to open your mouth. And when I shook my head, they hit me in the head with a revolver, and I went, oh, and they stuck the gun in my mouth, pulled the hammer back and pulled the trigger. This is what they did. This is what they were allowed to do. This is why no policeman has ever been convicted of not just framing the Guilford 4, the Maguire 7 and the Birmingham 6, but any innocent prisoner. And then we were taken before a judge. And the outcome was already decided. The only thing it was in the balance was the length of time we would get. And Donaldson, on the 22nd of October 1975, when we were found guilty of a crime we didn't commit, said that he wanted to know from the Home Secretary why the proper legislation was no longer on the statute book, why hanging wasn't available as a sentence to him. And he looked at us, myself, Carol Richardson, who's now dead, by the way. Carol died last year, 55 years of age, several breakdowns in prison, being administrated mind-altering drugs, came out to a world she didn't understand, confused, went to live with her lawyer, Alistair Logan. I went to live with Gareth. And she went into Guilford one day, and the people in Guilford came up to her and expressed their sorrow and horror and pain of what had happened to her. And she couldn't take it. And she went back and she decided she didn't want to go out and be recognised again. So she ate herself to 22 stone and was still taking psychotic drugs from the legacy of the horror she went through at prison. And in my head, I still hear Carol's screams on the 22nd of October when they dragged her down the stairs, and could hear her feet being dragged along the corridor by male screws, and the whimpering of her and the howls of her, and then the doors opening and them going in and administrating an injection to her to calm her down. Carol was never the same. Carol's dead now.
15 years for something I didn't do, for something I didn't know anything about.
Innocent people railroaded to jail on the back of what they were allowed to do to innocent Irish people. And they wanted to hang us. But I always knew I was going to get released because I shouldn't have been there. I didn't deserve to be there. I'd done nothing except be Irish. And when they released me, my father's words were burning into my brain. The last time I seen my father alive was Friday the 18th of January 1980, and taken up to the room he was in. And it was full of people in suits. The corridor was full of people, policemen in uniform with guns. And I'm reaching out to hold my hand and trying to pull the oxygen mask off his face. And I'm saying to me, I'm dying. You're never going to see me again. But don't be worrying. My death's going to be the key that opens the door to your cell that gets you out. And when you get out, you go out the front door, because you remember they put us in the back door. And that's what I did. I went out. And burning in my brain was Paddy Hill, who lived in the cell across from me in Guildford for the last 2 years of my sentence. And Paddy used to do marquetry. And every night it would be sanding and varnishing. And I often wondered, was he doing the sanding and varnishing to cover the tears and the whimper of missing his family? And Paddy came out and we fought for other innocent people, because innocent people fought for us. And Paddy set up Mojo, the Miscarriages of Justice organisation. And he set it up out of his own compensation, because we haven't let this go. Because we haven't had justice. Tony Blair apologised in 2005, but did he mean it? No. It was electioneering, it was to get Irish votes in England. That's what it was about. But we met Marie Eagles, who was the Undersecretary to Jack Straw at the Ministry of Justice. And she came out of the side door and she went over to me and Paddy and she started crying. And she said, I've been in the back room reading your files. Yous were not a miscarriage of justice, yous were something else. We always knew we were something else. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate policy by the British government in order to stop a murderous campaign in England by the IRA. In 1994, Barbara Mills, the Director of Public Prosecutions, ordered the government to put a 75-year public immunity interest order on our case, the Official Secrets Act. The only criminal cases in British history. Why? To protect the people who made their names on it. And let me tell you who they are. Michael Havers, who prosecuted us, who withheld evidence. Thatcher made him Attorney General, and then Lord Chancellor. Imbert, the policeman who was the negotiator between the Balcombe Street and the Special Branch, he was a run-of-the-mill detective sergeant. He organised the perjury. They made him head of the Metropolitan Police. Thatcher knighted him, and Blair made him a lord. And when he was made a lord, Blair also offered Gareth Pearce an OBE for her services to justice. And when Gareth heard that Imbert was having an investiture at the same time, she turned it down. But I'll tell you what, I wish there had been a Julian Assange, an Edward Snowden, a Bradley Manning around when we were in jail to get unearth the papers that the government are holding and refusing to let the public see. I wish there was a Bradley Manning around then. Bradley Manning's kept the contract between the people and himself, because us as people elect politicians to go into power on our behalf, to enrich our lives, to keep us safer and to give us better economic conditions. We don't elect them to get into bed with oil companies. We don't get into bed with the likes of Cheney's Halliburton and all the rest. And we don't get them to bail out the bankers. We needed a Bradley Manning here when the Anglo-Irish Bank was collapsing and people were being taxed to death and having to dig them out of a hole. That's what we needed. And you've got to ask yourself, are we richer and wiser because of what Bradley Manning did? You bet your arse we are. And are we more informed about making choices when the next election comes up as to the dirty deeds that are done dirt cheap by politicians and bankers and oil companies? I would think we are. But what Bradley Manning did was expose the horror of what governments expect their children, their sons and daughters to do on their behalf. The pretext of going to war to liberate people who the ally is now the enemy and the enemy is now the ally. We all need to be aware of what is being done in our name, because it's not my name they're doing it in. I didn't vote for a politician to take me to war, or to take my country to war, or to send young men and women to war, to be blown up and shot, some of them coming back without limbs, some of them coming back so traumatized that they become outside of society. That's not what you get politicians into power for. We have to stand up and say to them, you represent us, not big business, not Fannie Mac, not mortgage companies, not JP Morgan, not Chase America. We need them to enrich our lives, not destroy our lives. Voices. But if we talk about...
Okay, so that was Jerry Conlon. He passed away now, but anyway, that's it on that. They did, the government did give them compensation, but I don't think there's any compensation for what they did to them. Losing his father, poor Carol. Anyway, that's it. Just, oh my God, it just winds me up so much. And there were so many like that. It wasn't just the Guildford Four that they've done that to, and it was just amazing. The police officers that were arrested after all this came out, they were charged with perverting the course of justice, and they all got off, all of them. So in essence, no one has been charged for the Guildford bombing. Nothing's happened. They didn't go looking. In actual fact, I want to say, when an IRA guy, I forget the name of him now, but he when they went to prison, he basically, the IRA like this, they normally take responsibility for whatever they do, and this guy had taken responsibility. I forget what they had him in there for, but he also told them at that time, and this is years before Gareth Pierce even started, he told them, you can also add the Guildford bombing on me, because I did that. And they hid that. They did nothing about it. And he admitted that years before. Giuseppe Conlon could have been out and died peacefully at home. That's how messed up that is. But anyway, it is what it is. That's it from me today. I'll see you all probably towards the weekend. I'm going to do a live. I'll put a notice up and bring you some more stories. But yeah, that was one that I think should never be forgotten. It should be told and retold and retold, and I hope this never happens again. Never, not in the United States or in England. I honestly would hate to see that happen to anyone again. I hope they've taken heed to that it was a disgrace. Anyway, see you all later. Bye bye now. See if I can find my mouse.